Hello my friends, my name is Tim Johnson. This is the second in a series of videos about early sobriety, and I want to talk in this one about tackling what actually drives your addiction, what is behind it, and how to perhaps deal with that. I think the most important part of dealing with anything really is getting a good solid understanding of it, a knowledge of it. And what I've tried to do in this video is, with the latest science and my own research, if you like, and my own experiences and understanding behind my own addictions, is give you a better understanding of what drives yours. I think we're all in agreement that the reason that we take any substance, or indeed any sort of addictive behaviour such as gambling, your phone even, sex addiction, all these things, but predominantly talking about alcohol and drugs here, is to change the way we feel. Instantly, normally, instant gratification, to instantly change the way we are feeling at that particular moment in time, to reward ourselves, to give ourselves that initially, and this is where it all starts, that initial hit of dopamine, the reward chemical that your brain manufactures. And that feeling, we then go on to try and replicate. And we never really achieve that feeling that we achieved the first time that we get that hit, that reward hit. But we have to ask ourselves the question, why we want to change the way we feel, why we want to mask and hide from the way we feel. You know, it can be really innocent, and what we need to understand from this video is that some people can go about doing these things, give themselves this little reward. Let's talk in this instance about having a little drink to relax and unwind. And they won't have an issue about going back and becoming physically dependent and addicted to that substance. It will just be that little hit of dopamine and that instant reward they give themselves. And that will be enough for many people. But there are those of us who will go on into heavy addiction and become physically, mentally and spiritually dependent on that behavior or that substance. Why is that? Well, the latest science says there are three little areas that we need to look at first: nature, nurture and neighbourhood. Nature, first of all, it's generally found that those more compulsive and obsessive people and driven people amongst us are more prone to becoming addicted to substances and behaviours. And also, it's also proven that those who come from families, particularly parents, who are addicts, are much more likely to become addicts themselves, down to genetics. And that's fact. That's one little section. Nurture. Now, this is where what drives most addictions come in, and that's pain. If you have and suffer from physical or mental trauma, particularly in your childhood and later on in life, this can be right behind your addiction. Trying to get away and mask these feelings of pain and medicate these feelings of pain and hide from them can be what drives you. Also, nurture can be copying behaviours. Again, if you come from an environment that is constantly people using drink and drugs in front of you, then those copying behaviours, that nurturing behaviour, will become part of you. These are all reasons behind, but particularly pain and trauma. And neighbourhood is another issue. And that neighbourhood thing means that if you're in an area that drink and drugs are easily accessible to you, and all those peers and all those people around you are finding them easily accessible too and using them around you, then you're much more likely to be using them yourself. Drugs, alcohol, or behaviours, if that's what you're seeing around you and is easily accessible to you. They're just three areas. I mean, obviously there can be other reasons as well that drive addiction. I think understanding what's behind it becomes part of tackling the issue. It's the most difficult part, because unless you can deal with this and resolve it in some way, that pain, or if that's what's behind, and it's behind most addiction pain, and that can be physical, it can be mental, it can be trauma, it can be all sorts of different things, but let's just classify it at the moment as pain. Unless you can resolve that somehow, then it's always going to drive you backwards. The thing is, the pleasure and pain areas in our brain are in the same place. So that when we go seeking these rewards, then, we're activating the same areas of our brain. Pleasure, pain. It's very closely associated. Now, if you're not one of these people who can just have the occasional reward and see it for what it is, and you start constantly using the substance to change the way you feel, medicate the pain, you're going to keep activating the pain side of your brain. You're also going to stop eventually the brain making dopamine, because the chemicals will alter in your brain. Your brain will stop making dopamine because it'll be more pain than pleasure, and opiate receptors will be changed. All sorts of stuff will change in your brain, and you'll go into dopamine deficit. And dopamine deficit is what drives 99% of people back into relapse. Because, as I've talked about in the last couple of videos, when you go into sobriety, people expect, to start improving. But dopamine deficit, because the brain can't reach homeostasis and rebalance, it takes time, lots of time. It can be weeks, months, and in some cases years for this to happen, of resolving issues and trauma, of living healthily, of being in abstinence from that substance of choice, for that dopamine deficit to rebalance. And if you're in dopamine deficit, you're going to be feeling depression, anxiety, insomnia, all sorts of symptoms of when you first come out of withdrawal, and it's going to drag on and drag on. A lot of people call it PAWS, post-acute withdrawal syndrome, but it's really dopamine deficit. Now, the only thing that can resolve that is living healthily, being aware of it and understanding what the issues are, doing the best you can, and trying to resolve what was behind those issues. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the best ways you can attack the sort of dopamine deficit, if you like. But I talked a lot about it in the last video, so please have a look at that. Please subscribe, like, and share the videos as well. Just means more people can see them, and that's what's important about this channel. If they can help people from my experiences and people's experiences in the comments section, then that's what it's all about. So this dopamine deficit, you have to be aware of that, and you have to be patient, and you have to be strong. But understanding what's behind these feelings that you're having is half the battle. And resolving that trauma, this is a massive subject. The pain behind your addiction, as I say, can be physical, and that resolving that can be a bit of a nightmare, particularly if you've relied on pain-killing drugs and become addicted to them. Just to stop your pain, basically. To find other ways, and alternative ways, is a very big challenge. And I totally understand that. It's not easy. But there are alternative ways of dealing with pain. You need to talk to someone in a pain clinic. You need to look at alternative remedies, such as acupuncture in particular, which is amazing for dealing with pain. and other methods, and diet and exercise and all these things. Trauma that is of a mental or abusive kind is much more difficult to deal with, obviously. I came from a very traumatic childhood. My father walked out when I was extremely young. My mother was alcoholic and relied on drugs. It was a difficult childhood. And for many years, that pain, without me realizing it, that pain of abandonment and loneliness, and what went on to bullying of me at school and all the rest of it, went on to drive me back into addiction many times without me even having resolved it. How do you resolve that sort of pain? How do you resolve horrible pain such as sexual abuse, grieving, death of loved ones? All of these things, can be behind addictive behavior. Well, that's when you need to understand when you're going to need professional help or not. I mean, I went to all sorts of counselling, and in the end, I found peace in resolving my pain by forgiving my father. I never saw my father again after 5 years old, but I forgave him in my own way. And my mother, I had to understand her behaviour through my own behaviours and forgave her through that. It was never really her fault. She was in pain herself. And I came to understand that. And my healing started from that point. And gratitude and giving service and all these things helped me as well. But you may need professional counselling to deal with that. And don't be afraid of it. You have to face your fear. And you have to face it head on, and you have to deal with it professionally if you can't deal with it yourself. Some forms of horrible abuse, it's impossible to come to terms with yourself without some sort of professional help. And you have to be brave, and you have to understand what your unresolved pain is and what's behind and what drives your addictions. Anyway, that's all I want to talk about. That's quite a lot of information from this one video, and I hope it's been of some help to you. And the next one will be sort of follow on from this. So Carpe Diem. Seize the day today. Make today the day you change your life. Live strong, live free. Much love to you all. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.